Hello, everyone. This is Southern Belle Whisper. I hope you all are doing well this evening. I'm using a different setting on my LED light that my niece got me, so I think this is the last setting. I like this one a little bit better. It's not as intense as the really bright one like with the first video, and the golden light is nice too. That's going to be nice during the fall months. I'm really excited about that one, but I think I like this light the best. But I was thinking about it, and I had some downtime, and I just don't know when I will be able to make a video this week. My schedule at work is all over the place, and I am not off until Saturday. But then my brother is supposed to come on Saturday, so I don't know if I'll be able to make a video then either. So I think the nearest day would be like Sunday. So I've decided to make another video for you guys that will get you by until Sunday. And I hope you guys don't mind. I had the best time with you guys reading from this book. And I know I did the first chapter only a couple days ago, but considering this video was not planned and it's just like a special video for you guys, I didn't think you would mind. So if you haven't seen the video where I read chapter 1, then please check it out. But this is called Coal Miner's Daughter by Loretta Lynn. Such an inspiration. Okay, so we read chapter 1 in the first video. Let's find chapter 2. I don't think I marked it. Okay, so chapter 2, Daddy. Daddy never took a handout. We ate pinto beans and bacon, but he worked to keep the wolf back from the door. They Don't Eat 'Em Like My Daddy by Jerry Chestnut. I've never heard of him. A few years ago, a fellow named Jerry Chestnut offered me a song called They Don't Make 'Em Like My Daddy. All I heard was the title, and I knew I just had to make that record, because that's how I feel about my daddy, who died when he was a young man, around 51 years old. He had high blood pressure, and that worries me a lot because the doctors told me recently that I've got high blood pressure sometimes. Also, I have migraines, just like my daddy. Even though he died before I ever got started singing in 1959, I feel like Daddy's been the most important person in my life. I'm very close to Mommy too, and though Doolittle has just about raised me since I was a girl, I had almost 14 years of Daddy giving me love and security the way a daddy should. He'd sit and hold me on his lap while he rocked me by the fireplace. I think Daddy is the main reason why I always had respect for myself when times got rough between me and Doolittle. I knew my daddy loved me. I feel like there's a hair or something right there. Anyways, my worst feelings in my life were over leaving Daddy to go west. I didn't see him before he died, which makes me cry even today. I've often thought if I could live my life over, I would tell him how much I loved him. Kids don't tell their parents. It's a shame, but it's true. My kids don't tell me that. I know they love me, but they don't put it into words. So that's why I try to do with some of my songs, to tell kids to love their parents while they're still around. That song that Jerry Chestnut wrote tells about my daddy, even though it's about a great big man. And Daddy was only 5 feet 8 inches and weighed around 117 pounds. We've got pictures of Daddy, and he's usually got this straight face on him, not much emotion. Mountain people are like that. It's hard to read 'em if you don't know 'em. He was real shy, not like people from the coal camps who are used to talking with each other. But Butcher Holler was his kind of world. There, he was the greatest man you ever saw. He could fix anything with those weary arms of his. He could hammer up a well box, or a fence for the hog, or a new outhouse. You had to do things for yourself in the hollers, or you'd die. Daddy's name was Melvin Webb, but everybody called him Ted. His daddy and mommy lived in Butcher Holler. She was a butcher from the first family that settled up there. One of Daddy's grandmothers was a full-blooded Cherokee squaw, and it's the same on my mother's side, so that means I'm 1/4 Cherokee and proud of it. Other kids called me half-bred when I was a kid, but it didn't bother me. Being Indian was no big deal one way or the other. A lot of blood was mixed up in the hollers, if the truth be known. I was always proud of being Indian, and I've gotten more proud as the years go on. Daddy didn't go to school much, but he could read and write some. He worked outdoors when he was young, farming and stuff. When he was about 20, he met Mommy at the little church in the holler. They courted for around 2 years and then got married. They built their own little one-room wood cabin at the end of the holler. She would hold the boards and he would drive in the nails. Right after the Depression started, they began having kids, 8 of them, 4 boys and 4 girls, in the next 16 years. I was next to the oldest. Daddy couldn't get much work during the Depression, and we didn't have money. I remember one Christmas when Daddy had only 36 cents for 4 children. Somehow he managed to buy a little something for each of us down at the general store. He gave me a little plastic doll about 3 inches high, and I loved that like it was my own baby. Daddy was more easygoing than Mommy. He did most of the correcting in the family. The only time Daddy would get mad was when someone would smart off at Mommy. Then he moved right in there and settled it. He wasn't one of those men that's gone half the time either. He didn't have no bad habits. He was always teasing Mommy, but in a nice way. If she got mad about something, he'd laugh and say, "A squaw's on the warpath tonight." I never forget that line, and I wrote a song about it when I got older. But you know, the nice way he treated her gave me ideas about the way I want to be treated. I still feel there's better ways to handle a woman than whipping her into line, and I make that point clear in my songs, in case you hadn't noticed. Daddy was upset when he couldn't find work in the lumber mills during the Depression. He was used to working hard. They didn't have stuff like welfare checks in those days. But Franklin Delano Roosevelt started the WPA. Somebody told me that stands for Work Projects Administration, which gave men jobs. This is why you go into homes back in Kentucky today, and you'll see pictures of FDR on the wall. Daddy would work a few days on the roads with a WPA crew, and come home with a few dollars, as proud as could be. When he wasn't working on the roads, he worked on his big garden and patched the house to get us through the Depression. The WPA took care of me, too. The agent came up the holler and gave me a real store-bought dress when I was around 7 years old. Up to that time, all I wore was flour sacks Mommy sewed up as dresses. I kept looking at pictures in the Sears and Roebuck catalog and thinking how pretty everyone looked. But I never figured I'd get a chance to look pretty too. But one day, this agent brought this little blue dress with pink flowers and dainty little pockets. Mercy, how I loved it. Daddy kept saying, "Don't get your dress dirty." I took good care of it and put it in the laundry bag. but we let our family hog run loose, and he snatched that dress and just chewed it to pieces. Ruined it, he did. I must have cried for days. When the Depression got better, Daddy saved enough money to buy a house with 4 rooms in it. It was down the holler next to his folks in a big, broad clearing. This is the family house you see in the pictures, with a high porch facing the garden, and the hill rearing up behind the house. We had a spring behind the house for fresh water, and a well in front. We had a new outhouse in the back. In the winter, you'd wait too long because you didn't want to go outside in the cold, and then you had to run through the snow, hoping you make it to the outhouse. We still didn't have electricity, and our bunch of kids still had to sleep on pallets in the living room at night. But we had 4 rooms instead of 1, and we really thought we'd arrived. Finally, the mines got to working again, and Daddy decided to support his family as a coal miner. He never worked in the mines before, and it must have taken a lot of nerve to go into that terrible dark coal. But Daddy did it for us. He worked at Consolidated number 5, right down the holler. The seam of coal was only 3 feet high, and you can bet they didn't bother cutting a rock to give the men a place to stand up. That meant the miners had to crawl on their hands and knees and work on their sides or lying on their backs. Some of the miners wore knee pads, like the baseball players wear, but Daddy found that they raised him up so high that his back rubbed against the roof as he crawled into the mine. So he would come home every night with his knees all cut and sore, and he'd soak them in hot water before he could go to sleep. The next morning he'd be out working in the garden again until it was time to go to the mine. Daddy worked the night shift. He left home around 4 o'clock every afternoon and walked down the holler. We kids, we hardly said goodbye to him, but looking back, I can see the worried look on Mommy's face. She would keep busy with the kids all afternoon and evening. She had her hands full. But after we were in bed, she would sit by the kerosene lamp and read her Bible or an old Western book until she heard Daddy coming up the steps. They'd lie in bed talking, but I never heard him complain about the mines. Coal miners are funny that way. They don't like to get their wives upset. I remember when that Hayden mine blew up in Kentucky on December 30th, 1970, and I got myself in a big jam trying to raise money for those coal miners' kids' education. I'll tell you more about that later on in this book. Some of those widows testify later that their husbands had warned them about the dangerous blasting they were doing in the mine, but the wives knew enough not to ask any questions, or else their husbands would have been laid off. I feel real proud of Daddy for working in the mines. He kept his family alive by breaking his own body down. That's the only way to look at it. In the coal fields, you were never far from a disaster. When I was little, there was a big explosion in a mine above Van Leer that killed a lot of men. Other times, men would get killed in single accidents. I've walked past the mine when they were bringing out the men who were in a gas explosion. I remember all the women and children standing around, mostly crying. When I heard about the Hayden disaster, I could just picture those poor people huddled around a fire waiting for word about their men. That's what life is like whenever your man is a coal miner. I guess that's why I'm so soft on coal miners. I call my man the coal miners, and whenever I meet a guy at one of my concerts who says he was a coal miner, why, my eyes just get full of tears because I know how those men suffer. Like I said before, my daddy had high blood pressure and migraine headaches. I've seen him walk the floor many a night, crying from the pain. But when you're a kid, you don't think about it. One time they wrapped Daddy up in an old quilt Mommy made out of overalls and took him down the holler on an old wooden sled. Somebody said to me, "Your daddy won't be back." I didn't really understand what that meant, but after some time in the hospital, he came back. He couldn't catch a cold or he'd get real sick. He'd get up every morning and light a fire so he wouldn't get sick. And when Daddy started getting that regular miner's paycheck again, he would drag home groceries on a wooden sled he built himself. After he worked in the mines for a few years, he had trouble breathing. The doctors used to say that a miner was nervous or that he smoked too much. They didn't know about black lung in those days. Black lung is what you get when you breathe in too much coal dust. It never leaves your lungs, just stays there and clogs up your breathing, puts extra strain on your heart. They used to tell the miners that coal dust was good for you, that it helped ward off colds. Or they'd tell a miner he would get sicker from dirty sheets than from working in a coal mine. Lots of stupid things, but nobody knew any better then. Sometimes Daddy didn't take a bath before he came home, and all you could see was the whites of his eyes. Well, if that coal dust could stick to his face like that, it must have gotten into his lungs too. But it wasn't until sometime after Daddy died that the miners just plumb refused to work unless the government paid them benefits. And all the time, England and other European countries was paying off their miners with black lung. I've got relatives collecting black lung benefits today, but it came too late for Daddy. He got laid off when he couldn't work fast anymore. They just said, take your shovel and go home. No pension, no benefits, just go home. This was after I moved away, but Mommy wrote me a letter. They tried running a grocery store, but that didn't work out because some people came down to get groceries but didn't pay him. He left the world owing nobody anything, but a lot of people owed him. A few years later, the company closed down the entire mine where Daddy worked, bricked it right over. But after I got into show business, I asked them to find my daddy's old mining equipment. They had cemented all the old equipment inside the old bathhouse, but they broke in just for me and found an old carbide lamp and my cousin's safety helmet, which I'm going to put in the museum on my ranch. But they never found Daddy's old miner's cap or his identification tag. I'm pretty superstitious about things like that and curious about what could have happened to his stuff. I remember after World War II, Daddy saving up enough money for a battery-operated Philco radio. I'll never forget him pulling that radio up the holler on his sled and putting it in the corner of the living room, so proud of himself. It was the first radio we ever owned. I was 11 years old. Daddy didn't let us run it all the time because he wanted to save the batteries for Saturday night when he was off from work. He would sit there by the grate where it was warm and turn on Lowell Thomas in the news. I still hear that great deep voice of Lowell Thomas today, and it makes me think of Daddy. Then we get our favorite radio program of all, the Grand Ole Opry, direct from Nashville, Tennessee. Music was always big in our family. My grandfather, Daddy's father, played the banjo left-handed, and we'd all sing. When he'd get drunk, he played it with his toes better than most people can with their fingers. But the Opry was something else. I'd sit on the floor and listen to Roy Acuff, Ernest Tubb, and Molly O'Day, who was the first woman singer I can remember. Mommy would do this little hoedown dance whenever Bill Monroe played his bluegrass music. I still do Mommy's dance on my shows, kicking up my heels, hopping up and down like a squaw. I call it the Hillbilly Hoedown. I can't say that I had big dreams of being a star at the Opry. It was another world to me. All I knew was Butcher Holler didn't have no dreams that I knew about. But I'd curl up by Daddy and the radio and fall asleep. And on Sunday morning, I'd find the radio still turned on, nothing playing, just some crackling noises. But inside my head, I could still hear that music. Okay. I want to see how long the third chapter is because I'm into it now. Would you guys mind if I read the third chapter? Okay. No? Great. And this is just what I just rubbed off all my makeup from today. So if you see like bright splotches, it's not perspiration, it's where I wiped off all my makeup. Okay. So chapter 3 is Mommy. Mommy scrubbed our clothes on a washboard every day. Why, I've seen her fingers bleed. To complain there was no need. She smiled on Mommy's understanding way. Coal Miner's Daughter by Loretta Lynn. The first time I sang Coal Miner's Daughter in public, I couldn't finish the song. I just broke down and cried because they sneaked my mommy into the wings of the theater. Just seeing her tore me all to pieces, because I've always felt like a little kid compared to her. To me, my mother always was the most beautiful woman in the world. A red-headed Irish girl was her mother, and a half Cherokee was her father. So Mommy's 1/4 Cherokee with blue eyes and coal-black hair that's just now turning gray. Her skin gets dark if she just works in the garden for an hour. Her eyes look Irish, but her cheekbones look Indian. I always wanted to be as beautiful as Mommy, but I never made it. She and I have the same nose, but I've got these buck teeth that I've always hated. I tell our little twins that if they ever need braces, I'll find the money. Mommy's name is Clara, but in Butcher Holler they called her Clary. Me, they called Loretti. Everybody's name had to end with a Y. That's a hillbilly way. Mommy still calls me Loretti. Mommy's father was named Nathaniel Ramsey, which was changed from the old Indian name of Rainey. He came from Jenny's Creek, named after Jenny Wiley, the white girl who was taken by the Indians, and now there's a state park named after her. I think she's kin to me somewhere back there. Nathaniel Ramey used to stay with us sometimes. A quiet, proud man who never got gray hair. He had 12 children by his first marriage and 6 by his second marriage, and he lived to be 89 years old. We Cherokees are tough. They didn't used to teach much about Indian history in grade school, but I managed to hear about the Trail of Tears, named after the time the U.S. government made most of the Cherokee Nation leave our mountains and go all the way out west somewhere. Lots of them died on the way. When I found out what they did to my ancestors, I had a fit. I used to respect Andrew Jackson till I found out he pushed the Indians around. Since I moved to Nashville, I went out to his home, the Hermitage, just one time, and I won't ever go back. He wasn't on my side. Why should I be on his? Near my house in Hurricane Mills is a place where the Cherokees had to find the Tennessee River on their Trail of Tears. There are times when I can almost feel and hear them squaws and their babies crying from hunger. The way I see it, the white men came over here and said, "Look, we found us a new country." But it wasn't new. It belonged to the Indians, and it was taken away from them, from us. When I went to see that little Plymouth Rock in 1974, I read how the Indians taught the white man how to plant vegetables and build houses in that cold Massachusetts climate. If it wasn't for the Indians, them pilgrims would have all starved. I've always tried to help the Indians. My friends, the 3 Johnson sisters, are part Indian, just like me. In 1968, we got a campaign going for the Red Cloud Indian School at Pine Ridge, South Dakota. We took up 6 truckloads of clothing and school supplies and stuff. Then me and my band went up for a benefit show. They just about had to tie me down to keep me from taking an armful of those kids back home with me. I'd have done it too. At Christmas time, we still send candy and stuff up to the kids. They put my picture next to John F. Kennedy on the wall. The only thing that made me feel bad was when they had that uprising at Pine Ridge, because I didn't think that would help the people none. Still, the Indians have been treated bad, just about as bad as the blacks, really. Nothing makes me madder than to hear people put Indians down. If I hear some Indian complaining, I tell him to get smart and be proud of himself, because I am. In fact, I'm waiting for us to straighten this country out, get everybody living in little tribes, and fix his own medicine. We'd be a lot better off. Mommy learned to doctor her whole family when she was still a baby. Her family got the fever during World War I. They were all lying around the cabin talking out of their heads, and she was no more than 5 years old. Somehow she didn't get the fever, so she spent weeks fetching water and helping to cool them off. Her daddy taught her how to put salve on the bad sores on her mother's legs from blood vessels breaking. Her mother had 12 babies, but only 5 girls and a boy lived. When Mommy was 6, her mother died from the fever, and after that she was on her own a lot. She'd go from one family to another. If somebody was having a baby, she would take care of the other kids. When she was staying with a family, Mommy would eat regularly, but other times she had to pick berries and sell them to get enough to eat. She also did washing and stuff like that, anything to help. After Mommy got married, she used her Indian ways to raise us. She had her first 7 kids at home, with an old midwife coming in to help. The last one she went down to Paintsville Hospital to have. She figured she earned that. After Mommy had me, she was out setting onions on the hill only 3 days later. Mommy did everything the way they do it now, more natural. They get you up on your feet the first day now, and they let you go home after 3 days. Mommy was just ahead of her time. All 8 children are alive today, so she must have been doing something right. Whatever went wrong up on the holler, Mommy would take care of it. For burns, she'd make a salve of castor oil, flour, and sulfur. She'd cook it all together, then rub it on the wound, and it would heal real fast. When you got a cold, Mommy would make a poultice for mustard seeds and rub it on your chest. It would take the cold right out of you. But it was so hot and smelly, us kids would swear we'd rather have the cold than the poultice. One time my brother Herman was cutting some weeds with a big sheath, and he hit his foot, cutting an artery. That's bad. That blood was pumping, swish, swish, swish. Mommy just ripped off her petticoat and twisted it around his leg in a tourniquet to stop the bleeding. Mommy saved my life too when I was little. My dress caught fire when I was sitting too close to the fireplace. Mommy was supposed to be peeling potatoes for dinner, but she decided to sit by the fire to get warm. She saw my dress on fire and she just pulled me off the floor and ripped that dress on my back. Then she beat out the fire with her bare hands. I didn't get burned at all, just a bloody nose from bumping against a chair. Mommy's hands were blistered for a week, even though she put them in cold water right away, the way the Indians did. Mommy had a special tea for every occasion. She'd make her teas out of roots and herbs, but she had to be real careful or they could kill you. Like one time she made a tea from the mayapple root, but instead of using the female mayapple, she used the male. It gave one of the kids a stomachache for days. Mommy also made sassafras tea. Daddy drank that for his high blood pressure. When I was little, I had a real bad case of black measles. I had them for 9 days, but they wouldn't break out, and I was getting worse. Mommy told me she was going to make a special tea out of sheep manure that was supposed to make the measles break out. Lordy, I watched her making that tea, and I knew I was going to die if I had to drink it. All of a sudden, those measles started popping out all over me, and I was better in about 2 days. I never touched a drop of that tea. Maybe that was the way it really worked. We also had tea made from what we called Life Everlasting. It was good for colds and shivering. Sometimes we dry it out and smoke it a little. Some people think Life Everlasting is the same thing as marijuana, which also grows easily in the mountains, but I'm not sure about that. We never knew about marijuana when I was growing up, and I still haven't tried it to this day. I never did like smoking much, and I haven't touched tobacco since I was a girl. Mommy smoked and she drank coffee, but she wouldn't let none of us kids do it. And we wouldn't complain about it, or she fixes good. One time we had company, and they asked me if I drank coffee. I was around 11 or so, and I said kinda smart, "No, Mommy won't let me drink coffee." Well, do you know what she made me drink? A whole pot of coffee, just to teach me not to smart off. I was so sick my stomach was foundering for a day. That's a Kentucky word for upset. But I didn't learn my lesson about smarting off. We used to eat only 2 meals a day, breakfast and supper. We kind of snack on leftovers in between because we didn't have enough food. Mommy even had to grind up an old plate during the winter to feed the chickens. Seemed like they must have liked it because they gobbled it up real fast. Anyway, Mommy would put sweet potatoes, apples, turnips, and cabbage heads in a hole under the floor, and they'd keep all winter wrapped in straw. She let us eat one sweet potato for supper, and then another just before going to bed. Well, another time we had company, and they saw our leftover potatoes being warmed on the wood stove. The guest said, "Didn't you eat all your supper?" And I answered kind of smart, "No, my mommy only lets me have one sweet potato." Well, you guessed it. She made me eat every sweet potato in that pan. And this time, I was so sick, I thought I was really going to die. That fight taught me a lesson about smarting off. In spite of that, I still got into my share of trouble with Mommy. I hated to wash dishes, and I'd do anything to get out of it. I even hid the dirty dishes under the kitchen cabinet. And one time, Mommy found out and cracked me over the head with a broomstick. Daddy saw this and said to her, "No wonder she don't have no sense." At the time, I thought, good old Daddy, always sticking up for his little girl. You won't believe this, but it wasn't until after I was married that I figured out Daddy wasn't exactly praising his little girl. Mommy is still healing people. She now lives in Wabash, Indiana, where she married Daddy's first cousin, Tommy Butcher, and she works in a home for retarded children. Her job is to make sure the kids get their medicines. She doesn't make the medicines herself. They're prescribed by a doctor, but she swears the medicines are the same as she made when she was raising us. The home where she works is a beautiful place called Vernon Manor. You think of homes for... I'm sorry, I really did not mean to say this word. I say mentally handicapped instead of the R word. I'm so sorry. It came up so fast on me I didn't even realize. So, you think of homes for mentally challenged people, and you think of those big, ugly buildings that the government puts up. But this is a private deal, and that's why it's so nice. It's laid out in a big H shape, all on the ground floor, and all the rooms are bright and sunny. The kids are from infants to 19 years old, and most of them have physical problems too. They've got doctors and nurses, but I think Mommy knows just as much about caring them. She makes a saw by a soap and some other stuff and rubs it on those little children's sores. Her bosses say nobody can heal a child better than she can. They're always after her to teach them before she retires. Mommy says she's not much for writing things down. She's got a few secrets written down in a family Bible somewhere. I'd say that someday that's going to be valuable to medical science. Her bosses call her the Squaw because she's got special powers. She can read the grounds in a coffee cup and tell your future. We got some kind of extrasensory perception in our family too. Me and Mommy are on the same wavelength. I can always tell when she's sick. I'll call her up and say, "Mommy, what's wrong?" And she'll tell me she's got the virus. I'm the same way with my oldest daughter, Betty Sue. I think it has something to do with being Indian. Anyways, you guys, hope you enjoyed this video. I might do this video in black and white because I think I've been perspiring a little bit, and you guys know I hate doing that on camera. But I will be talking to you guys soon. I think there's one day this week where I get off at 4:30, so I'll try to do a video for you guys then. But I love you guys. I'll talk to you soon.